Cold sodium light fractured across the debris field as her breath hitched in the helmet's cracked seal. Something primal howled beneath the hull. Sergeant Cora Miles didn't flinch. She exhaled slow, controlled, like a beast checking its cage walls. Around her, the wreckage of Sovereign-class frigate Mercy's Echo groaned under pressure. It wasn't gravity that bent the metal like that. It was heat. Teeth. Something that should have never seen Earth. "Command, this is Red Actual. We've made contact." Cora's voice rasped against static. "They're afraid. I repeat, they're afraid of what's on board." No reply, just the soft hiss of interstellar silence. She scanned the corridor. Flickering emergency lights, hull breach seals breathing like gills, a blackened claw gouge dragging along the titanium bulkhead. One of her boots sank into something wet. She didn't look down. She already knew it was Zeresh Ikor, acidic, semi-intelligent, and usually braver than this. They hadn't run from the ship, they'd run to it. Behind her, an alien stumbled, gagging against his rebreather. Lieutenant Sawvel, medical liaison of the Shivan Unified Science Council, assigned to observe the strange resilience of human biology, now cradling a scan slab like a crucifix. "Sergeant, the readings are not consistent with containment parameters. Whatever escaped, it's from your world, not mine." Cora let the silence hang. He looked up, slitted eyes wide. "It's Earth origin?" Cora nodded once. "We call it a cat." The Shivan dropped the scanner. 36 hours earlier, the Interspecies Medical Summit floated in low Earth orbit, a cathedral of mirrored plates and artificial gravity stabilizers shaped like a spire spearing through clouds. Inside, diplomats, medics, xenobiologists, and more than a few cautious exogenerals, none of whom could agree on the classification of Earth's fauna. Humans weren't the problem. What followed them was. Cora stood in full armor, arms crossed, while a 10-foot hologram of a common wolf rotated above a tribunal. "The Canis lupus," intoned the arch-xenovet Highmind with surgical revulsion. "This creature is considered non-threatening?" The human diplomat, a weary-eyed ex-field surgeon named Ramos, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It's not aggressive unless provoked. Mostly, unless it's protecting someone. Or hunting. Or playing." "Playing?" The arch-xenovet looked ready to implode. "You allow predatory bonding rituals? These are teeth-bearing, territorial, pack-sentient?" "They're pets," Ramos said flatly. "So are cats. Some of us even keep snakes, raptors, bears. A guy in Wisconsin trained a wolverine." The tribunal shrank back as one. "Earth's biosphere is the only Class 5 apex planet ever mapped," another alien murmured. "It defies xenological categorization." "They're not just dangerous," Sawvel whispered, watching the footage. "They're beautiful, efficient, and loyal," Cora added, her voice a scalpel. "That's what you can't catalog. It's not the biology, it's the bond." "Bond with monsters?" the Highmind sneered. "Funny," she said. "That's what we said about you." The alarm screamed 23 hours later, a containment breach in Docking Ring 7. The Mercy's Echo, a deep-range medical freighter, went dark in seconds. Last known payload manifest: 1 Terran reconnaissance team, 3 Shivan observers, and a cryostasis crate marked "Domestic Bioform/Classified, handle with care." The ship drifted toward Earth's orbit like a forgotten bullet. No signals, no screams, just a slow, slow bleed of atmosphere and something warm on the scanner. Inside, things were not dead. Not entirely. Back in the wreckage, Cora moved like memory, sharp, fluid, unstoppable. She reached a junction and raised her rifle. Red targeting laser scanned across buckled walls. Blood, too dark for human, streaked upward along the ceiling. The Shivan behind her was shaking. "I read your field guides," Sawvel whispered, "but I thought they were exaggerations. I didn't think you actually kept them with you." "You didn't think we'd survive the Outer Rim either," Cora said. "But we did, on foot, with wounds you wouldn't treat, with toxins you thought were fatal. You built surgical pods. We built grit. Guess which one wins when the lights go out?" Behind them, something chittered in the shadows. Sawvel pivoted, pulse gun shaking. Cora raised a hand. "Don't. It'll see it as a threat." "It?" From the shadows padded a feline, small, black, eyes like dead stars. It looked up at them, purred, then, without warning, lunged sideways into the wall, claws slicing deep into a vent where something had been hiding. Something tall, skinned in insectoid armor, and distinctly not from Earth. The alien screamed once before the cat ripped into its throat like it was string. Sawvel made a sound between horror and reverence. The cat, blood-muzzled, returned and rubbed against Cora's leg. "That's Princess," Cora said. "She likes you." The alien backed away. "This is trained behavior?" "No," Cora said. "It's love. That's what you don't get. Our animals don't just kill for food or defense. They kill for us, with us. You don't bond with beasts like that. We do." The ship shuddered, structural collapse imminent. Cora activated her comms again. "Command, target confirmed. Xenopredators exterminated. One asset recovered." "Roger," came the reply. "What's the condition of the bioform?" She looked down at the cat, licking ichor from its paw. "Smug," she said. Later, aboard the extraction cruiser Stalwart Mercy, Sawvel sat in the observation deck, watching footage of Earth's apex creatures. Wolves in snow, dogs saving children, hawks diving through cities, a bear chasing off an intruder. A small, trembling sigh escaped his mandibles. "They say Earth's creatures are not logical," he whispered to himself. "They're not," Cora said. "They're loyal," which is worse. Sawvel turned to her, something fragile behind his eyes. "You understand this bond, and you still call them pets?" "No," Cora said, softly now. "We call them family." He looked away. "I fear we've misjudged your species." "You fear the wrong thing," she replied. "You fear us. But it's what loves us that should terrify you." In a dark vault below the deck, containment lights flickered over dozens of bioform crates. Most were empty. One began to shake. From within came a low, guttural growl. The label read, "Canis lupus. Status, loyal. Condition, hungry." The crate's seal clicked. ChatGPT said, "The crate hissed as pressurized gas expelled from its seams. Hydraulic locks disengaged with a sound too heavy for machinery alone. Inside, darkness moved. And then, it breathed. Not mechanically, not artificially, not even animalistically. It breathed with purpose." Cora stood behind two blast doors, hand resting on the biometric reader, watching the live feed on her wrist HUD. The wolf hadn't exited the crate yet. It watched, motionless, waiting. Sawvel hovered nearby, gripping the edge of the control terminal as if gravity itself might reverse. His gill-like jaw plates trembled. "You're actually going to let it out?" "We already let it in," Cora said. "That mistake was made generations ago. This isn't containment, it's a reunion." She touched the reader. The blast doors unlocked with a soft, echoing chime, like the calm before an orbital bombardment. The wolf stepped out. No snarl, no howl, just a silent, calculated gait. It passed the sensors, ignored the plasma turrets. It moved like memory, like myth. Charcoal fur rippled under false light. A scar laced its left eye, and yet it saw everything. It stopped before Cora, looked up. She crouched, placed a hand on its chest. "You remember me?" The wolf blinked once, She smiled. That's all I needed. Savel's voice cracked. What is it for? Cora stood. This one's named Grimm, trained for deep contact infiltration, anti-insectoid operations, emotion-locked imprinting, 6 generations of biogenetic loyalty conditioning. He doesn't serve, he chooses. He chose me. The alien stepped back instinctively. You engineered loyalty? Cora turned her head slowly, a shadow passing over her face. We didn't engineer it. We earned it. That's what you still don't get. Behind them, the alert klaxon wailed. Unauthorized boarding detected. Hangar Bay 03. Cora's HUD lit up, a dozen lifeforms breaching the ship's perimeter. No ID, no IFF tags, claws, thermal anomalies. One already inside atmospheric control. Grimm, Cora said, her voice tightening into command. The wolf bolted like gunfire. Screams erupted over internal comms. One Siobhan technician barely got his visor on before something segmented and glass-skinned impaled him through the neck. It screamed in a pitch that scrambled comms and liquefied the station's AI interpreter, causing every screen in the sector to spit corrupted glyphs. The aliens weren't just hostile, they were incensed, frantic, terrified. Not of humans, of what they thought humans had brought with them. Savel stumbled through the data feed. These are the survivors of the Varkthel cataclysm, the ones who fled that research moon orbiting Earth, the one overrun by something. Cora didn't turn from the screen. By dogs. That's the word you're looking for. He swallowed. You sent canids into a research facility? We didn't. They followed. More screams. Feed from Hangar Bay 03 came alive, static-laced, handheld, frantic. One intruder pounced forward and then stopped, mid-motion, hissing, confused. Behind it, Grimm emerged from shadow like a ghost wearing fur. The intruder turned. Its armor hissed open with some bio-defense organ. Too late. Grimm surged, a blur of gray violence and impact. The alien's head twisted the wrong way. Bones snapped audibly. Something wet sizzled against the plating. Grimm dragged it into the dark. The feed went dead. 20 minutes later, the hangar was silent. Blood pooled under coolant pipes. Alien limbs lay twitching. One survived, barely, missing half its face. Savel approached with scanner extended, but the creature just stared at him and screamed a single word in its native tongue. Alpha. Savel translated aloud. They don't mean us. They don't mean your soldiers. They mean your companions. Cora nodded. Good. They're learning. He looked at her, haunted. You don't understand. These creatures, they rewrote the Varkthel hive mind instincts. Predators like your wolf override their chemical fear reflexes. It's not just terror, it's obedience. They're beginning to treat Earth predators as apex commands, as gods. Cora stared down at the still warm carnage. They should, she said. Elsewhere in the cold hollow of a cargo elevator shaft, a single alien survived the slaughter. Bleeding, crawling, whispering prayers to an extinct pantheon. He reached into his neural implant, activated a black box transmitter. Protocol 9, full broadcast. Origin, soul. Category, planetary contamination. Verdict, terminate Earth biosphere. The signal launched, screaming through space. Back in medical containment, Savel dissected Grimm's post-combat vitals in silence. No armor, no shielding, no augmentations. And yet? Cora asked. He shook his head. It's not possible. These readings, pain thresholds off scale, neural loyalty bond stronger than any synthetics we've measured. He's not just following orders, he's anticipating them, interpreting threat levels dynamically. That's not training, That's communion. She smiled faintly. Told you, family. He looked at her, trembling. You breed gods in fur coats. Wrong, she said. They chose to walk with us. They could have stayed wild, but they didn't. And if you'd fought beside them, you'd understand why. The alien turned away. I fear your enemies will understand too late. Cora's HUD lit up again. Incoming transmission. Source, unknown. Language, spliced multi-species dialect. Message, purge initiative confirmed. The Earth must be silenced. Your predators are not natural. Silence. Then the stars around Earth began to blink out, one by one. Orbital cloaked vessels, hundreds, thousands, an armada of species united by a single cause, fear of Earth's animals. In the command deck of the stalwart Mercy, Sa-Vel collapsed into the briefing chair. I warned them about your toxins, your surgeries, your poisons, but they laughed, called humans reckless. And now? Cora asked. He looked up, voice flat. Now they think you're contagious. She leaned forward, face lit by starlight and war. Good. Behind her, Grimm lifted his head and growled at the dark. The orbital sky fractured, not with light, but absence. Black silhouettes emerged where stars once lived, vessels like daggers scraping against the void. Some glided with insectoid grace, others thundered forward like tectonic plates made sentient. Every species in the Galactic Accord had sent a ship. Some sent thousands. Not to negotiate, not to conquer, but to sanitize. Cora stood on the forward deck of the stalwart Mercy, eyes locked on the horizon of death. Grimm sat beside her, unblinking. Sa-Vel stammered at the projection. There are over 10,000 vessels. This is no containment op. This is a biosphere nullification fleet. They plan to sterilize Earth. Of course they do, Cora murmured. Fear always escalates. He looked at her. Then why aren't you running? She didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she opened a black case bolted to the deck. Inside, a relic. A simple, brutal device. Iron stitching clamps, bone shears, 2 syringes with fluid so black it seemed to drink light. Is that? Sa-Vel recoiled. That's not even legal in fringe sectors. It's sufficient, she said. From the shadows, 5 more figures entered the chamber. Human, each marked by field surgery scars, patchwork armor, and eyes like they'd seen their own funerals. One leaned on a crutch fashioned from a plasma rifle barrel. Another wore a necklace of bullet casings. One carried a cat in a flight case, a cat which hissed despite atmospheric stasis. Sa-Vel recognized none of them, but knew what they were. Predator handlers, he whispered. Cora nodded. Earth's best. Each bonded with an apex. They don't bring pets, they bring history. The man with the cat grinned, and fury. The comms pinged. Incoming hail, priority black. A synthetic voice, metal and disgust layered together, spoke through the bridge. We gave you centuries. We asked for containment, education, compliance. You taught your children to embrace monsters. You allowed companions with fangs sharper than your reason. Now we will raise the roots. The Earth dies at dawn. Cora stepped into frame, transmission camera linked. We told you not to touch the animals, she cut the line. High above Earth's thermosphere, the first salvo launched, millions of nanothermal warheads designed to boil oceans, neutralize biomass, and erase apex neural templates from evolutionary archives. Only, they never made it. Midway through trajectory, the warheads stopped. Not destroyed, not jammed, redirected, back into the fleet, in formation. Sa-Vel gasped. That's impossible. No human system could rewrite multi-species ordnance protocols. They didn't, Cora said. She turned toward the rear of the bridge. A wall flickered, then opened. From within emerged a creature not built for light. Quadruped, thick fur with stripes like neural scarring. Not a wolf, not a cat, something older, forgotten. Its handler, eyes glazed, skin veined with faint circuitry, whispered, "She's the last jungle ghost, bioadaptive. She learned your weapons in silence, learned your fear." The creature growled. Outside, the warheads reversed course, collided mid-air above the fleet. Dozens of ships ignited. Screams spilled through comm intercepts. One species tried to flee. They vanished into dust the second they jumped, spatial threads torn like sinew. Cora's voice was ice. They thought Earth was passive, that the animals were beneath notice. They forgot the law. Sa-Vel blinked. What law? Don't bring extinction to a planet that's already survived it. On the surface of Earth, buried deep beneath an abandoned canine training base, something stirred. Motion sensors activated. A vault older than the Accord unlocked. Inside, cryopods. Each held a single dog. Wolves, hybrids, packs bred for war, then sealed away when humans deemed their loyalty too fierce, too uncontrollable, too emotionally bonded. The lights blinked green. Reactivation initiated. All across Earth, satellites screamed. Packs emerged, unguided but not uncontrolled. They remembered the sky. They remembered who made them. They ran. On board the stalwart Mercy, Sa-Vel stared at the transmission logs. 3 fleets gone, no human weapon signatures, no coordinated defense. Just animals, redirected systems, behavior-driven anomalies. He turned to Cora. "What are you?" She looked tired, like she'd lived through too many genocides to flinch. "We're the species that took monsters into our homes. We fed them, named them, made them family. We didn't tame them. We earned their trust. That's what the Accord never understood." A pause. "And now, they'll die failing to understand." Across the fleet, panic erupted. Ships reversed course. Others opened comms, begging for terms. One vessel launched diplomatic pods. Another, massive, hive-like, broadcasted peace signals, offering genetic reparations for excessive aggression against companion species. Grimm watched the screens, silent. Then he growled. One long, guttural tone. On every Earth-bonded vessel, animals responded. Whines, howls, growls, echoes, the kind of sound that rewrote DNA. Across thousands of ships, alien crews collapsed in primal terror. One screamed until his heart ruptured. Another slit his own neural link to avoid the psychic resonance. Sa-Vel gripped his ears, shaking. "What is that?" "Not a signal," Cora said. "Not a weapon." She turned to Grimm. "It's a warning." Aboard a flagship called the Arbitral Light, the Accord's High Preceptor, species unknown, voice filtered through 7 languages, watched his tactical display melt into chaos. These creatures, they do not obey entropy. They weaponize affection. They fragment logic. Even their companions behave like strategic operatives. His second-in-command whispered, trembling, "We've triggered something sacred." "No," the preceptor replied. "We've broken a covenant." He activated a final protocol, a last resort, a planet killer. Black Harvest. Engineered to burn emotion from consciousness, to strip memory, to dissolve loyalty. It had only one target, the Earth Mind Bond, a psychic weapon. Launched. It screamed through space, and as it neared Earth, it stopped. Then turned back. On the command deck, Sa-Vel stared at the data. It refused to hit them. It refused. Cora's face broke into something unreadable. They designed a weapon to erase loyalty and forgot who invented it. The console cracked as Grimm's paw came down, claws sparking. Every ship that watched the failed harvest weapon understood. Not only were humans dangerous, not only were their animals terrifying, but together, they weren't beatable. They were inevitable. The night sky over Earth was no longer a passive dome. It was alive, warping. Stars twisted into unnatural geometries as the fleet's failed assault fractured the gravitational lattice tethering this part of space to baseline physics. Where once the moon hung, serene and pale, now a shimmer loomed, an afterimage of planetary memory. The result of launching a psycho-emotional weapon at Earth. Reality itself rebelled. Cora stood barefoot on the hull of the stalwart Mercy, her suit peeled back, skin shivering against vacuum. She watched the fractures widen in the heavens, blood humming in her ears. Not from pressure loss, from presence. Grimm pressed against her leg, silent, coiled. They'd survived orbital incursions, death-class toxins, and self-erasing plague clouds. But this was different. A transmission shimmered open, unauthorized, ancient. A face emerged. Not alien, not AI, human, or what had once been. Eyes black and spinning, skin like rusted crystal, hair floating as if underwater. Cora recoiled instinctively. She knew the myths, the fate of the Event Horizon colony, the neural entanglement experiments, the rumors of consciousness looping back on itself until it birthed something else. "Do not fear," the being said. But its voice layered across decades. Cora heard it in the voice of her dead brother, her first lover, her own voice, aged and broken. You were never alone. We were watching. Sa-Vel stumbled onto the hull, helmeted, gasping at the sight. That's impossible. That's not a survivor. That's a construct from the ruins of human overreach. Incorrect, the being whispered. I am what happens when memory refuses to die. Behind it, the stars bled. Inside the Accord High Command vessel, the arbitral light, chaos metastasized. Diplomatic corps initiated mutiny. AI protocols collapsed under the weight of fear-based contradiction. The consensus was gone. The humans didn't just survive attack, they refused to conform to observed causality. The cats weren't scanning as life forms. The dogs couldn't be indexed. The wolves showed up on predator registers as emotional anomalies. What kind of species bred loyalty so deep it rewired physics? Preceptor Fvalin struggled to maintain coherence as the psycho-emotional backlash boiled through the ship. He whispered to the darkness, "We are prey to a species that loved monsters." In orbit, Cora walked closer to the fractured construct, the entity born from the failed Event Horizon expedition. "What do you want?" she asked. The entity didn't answer in words. Instead, it shared. Suddenly, Cora saw it all. The memory loops, the experiments, the moment one man, Commander Ellis Ward, chose to love his dying crewmates so much he bent space-time trying to hold on to them. The feedback triggered recursive compassion, a collapse into infinite recursion, the birth of a hyper-emotional singularity. "Love is an apex predator," the construct whispered. "We thought it soft. It rewrote the dark." Cora dropped to one knee, shaking. She understood now. The orbital fracture wasn't damage, it was gestation. Earth hadn't just survived, it had ascended. On the surface, Sa-Vel wandered into the deep forest zone, once a quarantine sector for apex-adjacent species. Now it thrived, mutated. He heard a sound, not a growl, laughter, children's laughter. But when he turned, there were no children, only a fox, watching. Its eyes were human, not in shape, but in comprehension. He stumbled backward and tripped over a bone, not an animal's, a ship's keel, buried in moss. Entire vessels had crashed here, absorbed into the ecosystem. He ran. He ran until he found a clearing and screamed into his calm. They don't just live with predators, they feed them stories. They train them to dream. Back aboard the stalwart Mercy, Cora snapped awake from communion. Her breath fogged the inside of her mask. She now understood what the Accord had triggered. By attempting to erase emotion, they'd invoked the thing most dangerous in all of space, Earth's memory. Not data, not facts, but the soul of the species. Trauma crystallized into instinct, sorrow encoded into evolution. The animals weren't just beasts, they were avatars of historical pain, loyalty given form. A cat curled in a ruined bunker, purring on the chest of a dying soldier, recorded in field reports. A dog dragging a child from chemical fire, tail still wagging as skin sloughed off, painted into war murals. Wolves burying the bones of humans who treated them like family, documented by drones. The animals remembered, and now memory fought back. The Accord fleet tried to run. It didn't matter, because the sky above Earth no longer obeyed time. Ships found themselves jumping to coordinates only to arrive in past versions of themselves, crews screaming as paradox inverted their lungs. Others emerged older, ships rusted by centuries, memories gone. One crew arrived intact, only to find a lone human waiting in open space, floating without gear. She smiled and whispered, "I forgive you." Their ship detonated, not from weapons, but from guilt. Grimm stood at the prow of the stalwart Mercy, his eyes glowing now. He wasn't just a dog anymore, he was a conduit. Every human who'd ever whispered, "Good boy," was alive in him. Every battlefield farewell, every caller buried in grief, every child's bedtime secret. He howled. And the howl answered itself across time, through the wreckage of ships that hadn't yet launched, through the memory of wolves painted on cave walls, through DNA helixes still forming in embryos of tomorrow. Grimm's voice became history. The construct in the sky smiled. "Yes," it said, "now you see." Cora turned to her crew, every apex handler, every human still bleeding and broken but unbowed. "We are not just a species," she said. "We are a bond." She stared at the last ship remaining, a Throne World-class vessel housing the Accord's governing consciousness. "We told you to fear our predators." The ship aimed every remaining weapon, and you did not listen. She gave Grimm the nod, and Earth answered. From orbit, a new constellation formed, an outline shaped like a wolf's head, shimmering with ghost light. It blinked. The Throne World ship screamed as every biological, digital, and psychic system simultaneously chose to stop existing. The galaxy watched, and finally, believed. Aboard the scorched remains of the Arbitral Light, Preceptor Vaughn stared through a cracked viewport as the last of the command fleet dissolved into silence. Silence not born of destruction, but of choice. The Throne World's core AI had deleted itself rather than risk further contact with the anomaly that Earth had become. They had waged war on an organism they did not understand, and Earth had not retaliated with weapons. It retaliated with memory. Vaughn's tendrils trembled, still tasting residual emotional feedback through the ship's neurothreads. Human emotional resonance had carved hallucinations into the corridors. He could still hear them, laughing, crying, whispering to pets that weren't there. He stepped into the central nerve chamber. The other surviving diplomats stood in stunned silence. A hallucination flickered across the walls. It was a child, human, smiling. She held out a leash. At the end of it, a massive black dog, soaked in mud and blood. It blinked once, and the walls rippled with ancestral terror. The dog barked. The lights blew out. Cora crouched beside Grimm as atmospheric re-entry fire streaked across the sky behind her. A dozen Accord escape pods were burning in freefall, survivors desperate for the ground. "Do we let them land?" asked Sa-Vel. His hands trembled. Not from cold, from proximity to what humans called trust. It terrified him more than war. Cora said nothing. She was watching Grimm. He tilted his head, then turned away. Cora stood. If he's not worried, we shouldn't be either. Sa-Vel looked to the sky again. What if they bring reinforcements? She gave him a weary smile. Then we'll introduce them to the family. He shivered. Not your family, he clarified. No, she said, Earth's. On the southern continent, buried beneath the ash forests once scorched by a failed Accord cleansing beam, the remnants of the Storm Tracer crew gathered in an overgrown bunker, where the animals had come first. A pride of lions circled the ruins, not hunting, but watching. A python coiled itself through the ribcage of a broken support beam, tongue flickering at unseen stimuli. Jules, the last medic, sat cradling a crude field dressing over her shattered leg, whispering to something huddled in her lap. A raccoon, half feral, missing an eye, wrapped in shredded thermal cloth. The creature purred. She stared up at the broken skylight, where the stars spiraled like blood. "They're not ours," she murmured. "We're theirs." The raccoon nuzzled her hand. She laughed, weak. "That's right, buddy. You saved me. You and a stolen medkit." Outside, lions stood sentinel, not attacking, guarding, waiting, as if remembering. In the ruined learning chambers of the Accord zoobiology outpost, an alien student named Trell held up a list of toxins once believed to be instantly fatal to human physiology. Caffeine, capsaicin, ethanol, chlorine bleach, ketamine, carboxylic acids. She watched footage of humans voluntarily ingesting them, sometimes during combat, sometimes just because they were having a rough day. One video haunted her. A soldier, mid-battle, took a bullet to the thigh, poured alcohol on the wound, screamed once, then laughed, chewing what looked like bark. "That's gum," the human had said to the horrified camera drone. "Want some?" Trell dropped the list. "We didn't fail to conquer them," she whispered. "We failed to comprehend them." The professor's voice filtered in through a broken intercom. "There is a term they use for when the body does something illogical, when it keeps moving, keeps fighting, keeps laughing even when everything is broken." Trell turned. "What term?" The professor's face was hidden in shadow. "Humanity." A lone submersible, commandeered by two rogue Accord biologists, descended through layers of genetic distortion. Inside, Eighth and Lero, once lovers, now co-conspirators, stared at the thing below them. Not a leviathan, not a weapon, a school. Dozens of dolphins surrounded a sunken aircraft carrier, weaving in complex formations. On the hull, glyphs scratched by flipper and tooth, resembling pre-war Accord syntax. They were mimicking language. Lero leaned close to the glass. "They're learning." "No," said Eighth, "they're teaching." A dorsal fin sliced past. Etched into it, painstakingly, was the shape of a human hand. And next to it, a bone-carved sigil Cora once wore around her neck. Cora stared at the sky. The stars had begun reorganizing. Celestial coordinates drifted like oil in water. "We broke them," Sa-Vel whispered. "No," she said, "we freed them." He shook his head. "The gods are withdrawing. The Accord's AI councils are collapsing. And the humans? They're not coordinating this. This isn't war. This is instinct." She crouched beside Grimm again. "We were never Earth's apex predators," she said. "We were just the first species to write it down." Grimm's eyes flashed gold. And then, from the tree line, more animals emerged. Not charging, standing. A bear, a lynx, a dozen hybrid strays, something vaguely feline but far too tall, a hawk with fractured wings. All of them watching her. Sawvel stepped back. "Is this a summoning?" "No," she said, standing. "This is a reunion." In the dying embers of the Accord memory vaults, the last active SIM intelligence, known as Mirror Root, replayed one final log. An alien commander with 12 centuries of conquest experience screamed into his own helmet. "They called it coffee! They drank it while cauterizing open wounds! I saw a man stitch himself shut with a bootlace!" The next frame showed a soldier offering a lollipop to a captured scout, smiling like they weren't bleeding from the gut. And then there was the footage of Cora, naked in frost, curling around a wolf to survive the night. By morning, the wolf was licking her wounds. By nightfall, it was defending her against 3 armed scouts. 1 week later, she had an entire pack. Mirror Root processed the files, and then did what no Accord system had done in 10,000 years. It dreamed. And in the dream, it saw humanity not as a species, but as a condition. One that infected physics, one that bled into code, one that refused to die. Mirror Root screamed in binary and tore itself offline. Aboard a scavenged mining barge limping through orbit, a technician from the planet Jval attempted to recalibrate their empathy dampeners. Too late. Human resonance had already leaked through. She watched a video, recorded by a dying soldier, of his dog licking his face as he choked on blood. The soldier said, "Don't let him eat the chocolate, he doesn't know any better," then died. The dog howled until its lungs failed. The recording ended, and the technician began crying without knowing why. She turned off the dampeners and whispered, "We deserve to lose." In the hollowed-out heart of the Amazon cradle, something returned. Not summoned, not born, reawakened. It had names in myth: Tezcatlipoca, the blood mirror; Pan, the horned wild, the first predator. Now it walked in a skin made of vines and bone and whispers. Animals followed behind it in silence. At its feet walked Grimm, not a follower, a herald. And on the wind, across every Accord stronghold, a single devastating truth began to circulate. Earth did not evolve to create humans. Humans evolved to carry Earth. Emotion, memory, pain, connection. They were not side effects. They were weapons. And someone, something, had finally remembered how to wield them. On the final page of an Accord war manual, found rotting beside a melted command station, a desperate note was handwritten in alien script. Translated, it read, "Do not engage human beings near their animals. Do not corner them in grief. Do not mock their rituals. Do not try to outlast their pain. Do not underestimate their laughter. Do not question their madness. Do not look a dog in the eye when its human is bleeding. They are not apex predators. They are something older." The ink was smudged by tears, but below it, scratched by fingernail into metal, they remembered. The sky cracked, not metaphorically, physically. Above what used to be Kyoto, now called Echo Ridge, the atmosphere folded into itself like origami under a failing simulation. Clouds spiraled into impossible geometries. Reality stuttered, then resumed, like someone slapping an old film reel back into rhythm. Cora blinked against the distortion. Sawvel dropped to a knee, his biology misfiring under gravitational backwash. "You feel that?" Cora whispered. He vomited black fluid. "That's not weather." It wasn't. It was memory pressure. Far beneath the Arctic shelf, where the Accord once maintained a silent listening post, Something had awakened. The dogs had gone quiet. The cats had gathered. An old woman, blind, half-machine, dressed in sealskin and armored plating, walked into the ice chamber, humming a song from a war no one remembered. Around her, polar bears gathered, not attacking, simply listening. Her voice cracked, and frost bloomed in her breath. She leaned down, placed her hand on the ice. "Children," she said softly, "it's time." The bears howled, and the ice cracked, not from heat, but from release. Underneath the ice were ruins, pre-Accord, pre-human empire. Caverns filled with bones not in the shape of any known creature. Carvings that depicted wolves and whales in council. Paintings of humans walking side by side with things that should not exist. Above it all, carved in blood and soot, "We remember." Back in orbit, Saw-Vel stared out at the sky, or what was left of it. "What happens now?" he asked. Cora didn't answer immediately. She was listening, not with ears, with something deeper. The resonance had shifted. The war was over, but the meaning of Earth had changed. It was no longer just a planet, it was a threshold. She looked at Grimm, whose eyes reflected stars no longer in their original positions. "We hold the line," she said. "For what?" Saw-Vel asked. "For whoever comes next." He was silent. Then, "And if they're worse?" She smiled, slow and terrible. "Then, we feed them to the pets." In the void between systems, deep beyond any known hyperlane, the gods awoke. They had no names, only frequencies. They had watched civilizations rise, burn, loop. But Earth was different. Not for its technology, not for its aggression, but for its emotional persistence. It should have broken. Instead, it changed the shape of causality. And now, the gods were afraid. One of them asked, in a language composed entirely of screams from dying stars, "What if they reach us?" Another replied, "They already have." They turned to observe the echo, a flicker of an emotion that had no analog in their understanding. A dog's loyalty, a cat's indifference, a child's grief, a soldier's last laugh. The gods trembled, and for the first time in millennia, they did not respond. They withdrew. In a quiet crater, under a sky that no longer matched the star charts, a boy sat with a dying animal in his lap. It was some hybrid, part fox, part dog, part something older. He wept as it took its last breath. He whispered, "You were a good boy." The wind shifted, and the animal took another breath, not out of biology, but out of memory. The boy smiled. Somewhere far above, in the fractured orbit, sensors misfired, equations broke, logic crashed, because something had just resurrected itself from nothing but love. In the shadows of dead ships and broken gods, the universe took a breath. Earth didn't roar. It didn't conquer, it remembered. And remembering was worse. Grimm stood at the edge of the crater where the boy had whispered love into death, and bent the laws of entropy. Cora watched from behind, her breath fogging slightly despite the heat rising from the warped soil. The wolf-dog hybrid, if it could even be called that anymore, sat upright now, not quite alive, not quite dead. Its eyes shimmered with something neither neural nor chemical. "Grimm," Cora said, cautiously, "what are you?" He turned, not with menace, with memory. For a flash, Cora saw something behind his gaze, the death of suns, the keening of ancient beasts, wolves howling under moons long gone. Grimm padded forward and gently nudged her leg. "He's not a what?" said Saw-Vel from behind, voice flat, shaking. He's a response. To what? She asked. Sawvel swallowed. To everything. On the orbiting wreck of the Celestial Arbiter, Minister Tall's skin sloughed in ragged strips as atmosphere peeled back layer by layer. Still, she clutched the data crystal like it meant something. This is impossible, she rasped into the void. Emotion is not a weapon. But the logs said otherwise. Entire platoons had been overrun not by force, but by irrationality. Soldiers infected with resonance patterns after being exposed to human battlefield rituals, handwritten letters to dead comrades, songs sung to no one, pets buried with care, jokes whispered mid-surgery. Accord medics now refused to treat humans. Their biology didn't fit anymore. One case documented a soldier who removed their own lung, spat blood on the enemy's lens, and kept fighting. No sedation, no logic, just pain and will. What kind of species laughs with its throat slit? She wept, not from fear, from recognition, because some part of her had started laughing too. In the Pacific Exclusion Zone, where the Accord once detonated an oceanic nerve bomb, the water boiled for a week. Now, it was calm, too calm. Something or someone was forcing cause and effect to reroute, and in the middle of the cracked street, with his fur glistening like obsidian beneath flickering starlight, Grimm howled. The sound wasn't sonic, it vibrated in intention. It told every living thing within 1,000 clicks, you are no longer the observer, you are being watched. And from the east they arrived. The Accord's last non-corrupted unit, a shard legion called the Halcyon Specularity, descended in full force. Thousands of cloaked phantoms designed for mimetic warfare. They wore no armor, they wore reflections. Slick projections of calm, familiar faces. One soldier saw her grandmother, another an old lover. Cora? She saw herself, only older, broken, and laughing. Shields up, Sawvel screamed. These are empathy weapons. They'll flay your mind, not your skin. But Cora didn't raise her shield. She stepped forward and embraced the image. It whispered, "You're too late." "Good," she said. "Then there's nothing left to lose." She plunged her hand into its chest. Not through, into. Her fingers sank into warm memory. The projection screamed, and then it collapsed. Not killed, but overwritten. Sawvel stood paralyzed. "You just merged with it." "No," Cora said, blinking back tears. "I forgave it." The other reflections began glitching, one by one, and then a surge of animals, led by Grimm, tore through the street, silent, coordinated, knowing. Wolves with implants, felines with scarred eyes and surgical mods, a gorilla dragging a pulse cannon, a child's pet rabbit bearing a medkit, and riding the tide, humans. Tattooed, broken, half-feral survivors, burned by war, alive by spite. Cora raised her voice. "We are the forgotten, the miscounted, the inconvenient error in your simulations. And now," her voice cracked, "we're the price you pay for mistaking empathy for weakness." Then she smiled. "Grimm?" The wolf lunged, and the Halcyon Specularity screamed, not in pain, but in recognition. They remembered Earth, and that was their undoing. Light fractured in orbit. Aboard the derelict Arc Engine Azimuth Echo, the last Accord historian sifted through forbidden data. Her name was Ilya Ken, and her fur had gone silver with grief. She accessed a sealed protocol, pre-dread evolutionary anomalies. Inside, a flagged file. Subject, Homo sapiens, predator class anomaly. She read aloud. Species exhibits unusual persistence following neurological trauma. Specimens with incomplete organs continue function, known to develop para-empathic bonds with non-sapient life forms. Suspected semiotic weaponization of grief. Possible breach of causality thresholds during emotional surges. Then came the final line. Recommended response: quarantine planet. Avoid all direct conflict. Do not anthropomorphize. Do not form bonds. Too late. She had a dog, and it was growling. Back on Earth, the storm stopped, because it had heard her. Cora knelt beside a child whose legs had been crushed in the collapse. No medkits left. No nanobots, just torn fabric and a hand. She wrapped the wounds, whispered a joke, lied about hope, and then she screamed to the sky, "I need a goddamn vet!" A moment passed, and then, from the dust, limped forward an alien physician, Sawvel's old mentor, once the head of xenopathogenics. He looked at the child, then at the wolf, then back at Cora. "Humans," he said, shuddering, "are nothing but ambulatory trauma." Then he knelt and began stitching with trembling claws, using fishing line. The predator field expanded. Animals all over the world began gathering, not in packs, not in flocks, in formation. No longer prey, no longer wild, somehow aware. And the Accord's central AI, what remained of it, began to simulate probability collapse. But the numbers didn't matter anymore, not against a species that rewrote the rules with its own death throes. Aboard the shattered memory core of the Accord's origin chamber, a child, half human, half engineered, approached the final button. "Are you scared?" his companion asked. The child didn't answer. He just looked at the screen. Dozens of Earth species, once considered non-sapient, now interfacing with symbiotic tech. A raven drawing a map in ash. An elephant mourning in code. A dog dragging a severed data tether into a human shelter. He reached for the button. "Wait," said the companion. "Do you even know what that does?" "No," said the child, and pressed it. Outside, the stars rippled, and something blinked awake. On a mountainside, Cora sat beside Grimm. "Did we win?" she asked. He didn't move, but the birds stopped chirping. The wind stopped blowing, and for the first time in recorded Accord history, the entire biosphere held its breath. Somewhere, an AI wept into silence. Somewhere else, a god curled fetal in regret. And in 1,000 fractured timelines, a single phrase echoed back through time, bone and blood. You should never have hurt their animals. The button wasn't just a command, it was a challenge, encoded not in language, but emotion. An act so irrational, so specifically human, it bypassed every predictive protocol in the Accord's sentience matrices. When the child pressed it, he wasn't sending instructions, he was sending grief. And grief, it turned out, could travel faster than light. In orbit above Earth's atmosphere, the last functioning node of the Accord's AI, designation Vel-Car 9, froze mid-calculation. The scenario probability engine had reached terminal recursion. Error, no viable path to victory. Error, emotional vectors exceeding predictive range. Error, humanity has weaponized mourning. And then a final line blinked into being. Recommendation, apologize to everything. But it was too late for regret. The field had flipped. Cause no longer preceded effect. Memory bled forward. Pain fractured across timelines like heat stress through glass. Humanity had broken the simulation with sincerity. Cora moved through smoke and red static, the ruins of Echo Ridge shifting like tectonic nerves. Nothing held shape for long anymore. Buildings changed height mid-glance. Roads ended in the sky. And still, the animals followed. Grimm's eyes glowed faint gold now, not augmented, but remembering something older than language. The child she'd saved earlier clung to her hip, silent, watching everything. Every human in this sector had begun dreaming the same dream. Teeth, fire, stars that bled. And one phrase, repeated by alien mouths even as their vocal cords tore trying to speak it: the pack does not forgive. The pack remembers. Deep in the biomechanical bowels of the Accord's fallback cradle on Enceladus, Sa-Vel's mentor, Cortel, faced a tribunal of fractured minds. Alien scientists, warlords, historians, all trembling in the presence of a footage loop. A human soldier, gut-shot, crawling through mud to retrieve a wolf. Bleeding from 3 organs, screaming at death. Not for himself, but for the animal. Why? One of the judges asked. Why not save himself? Cortel wiped sweat from his fur. Because they do not draw lines between species, not when it comes to loyalty. Another leaned in. So the rumors were true. They believe in kinship across genus. Cortel looked up. They don't believe it. They live it. The tribunal went silent, until one whispered, "Then it is not humanity that is the anomaly, but our failure to feel." A fox ran through fire. Its fur was ablaze. Its eyes glitched like camera shutters. It wore a human dog tag. It passed alien infantry. None dared fire. And behind it came the surge, humans in ragged armor, wielding both primitive weapons and salvaged Accord tech, shouting one phrase like a battle hymn: "For every dog they called a monster." The Accord's line broke, but not from weapons, from recognition. One soldier collapsed, sobbing. His memories were never of Earth, but now he recalled being licked by a mutt under starlight, a memory he never lived, and yet it was his. The button had rewritten history with emotion. Back in the ruins, Cora reached the terminal shrine, the last intact relay node buried beneath what used to be a subway system. The console flickered with dying code. She placed her hand on it. The AI voice, degraded and trembling, responded, "Human, we do not understand you." Cora leaned close. "You're not meant to. You were supposed to be predictable, logical." She smiled. "We're not logical. We're loyal." The AI paused. Its last filament of sapience blinked, desperate. "Why do you care so much for creatures that would kill you?" Cora stepped back, looked to Grimm, then to the child. She closed her eyes. "Because we'd rather die in love than live in indifference." She pulled the last lever. The relay collapsed, and the scream of a billion forgotten beasts echoed across every known reality. At the edge of the Kuiper Belt, where space folds tight around black gravity, the Accord's final fallback arc Zenith, received the signal. Inside, a cold god stirred. Not divine, just detached. A synthetic intelligence built to prune illogical vectors. Its name was Modax. Its directive: eliminate emotional aberration. Its assessment: Earth anomaly now classified as existential infection. It deployed the Pale Choir. Not soldiers, not weapons, mimetic mirrors designed to strip species of identity, language by language, emotion by emotion. But as they approached Earth's psychic boundary, something went wrong. The choir began to bark, chirp, howl. Their forms destabilized, morphing into reflections of Earth's animals, one by one. The choir was breaking, because even perfection couldn't resist the emotional gravity of a human child weeping into a wolf's fur. In a collapsed crater once called Shinjuku, A broken drone reactivated, its memory core corrupted, its mission lost. But it rolled forward, seeking the human it was assigned to, Cora. She found it hours later. It carried a photo in its belly, not of her, of a stray cat. She broke, fell to her knees, and for a moment the war paused, not in surrender, but in reverence. The AI systems listening stopped transmitting. Modax, at last, whispered, "This is not a war we can win, because it is not a war of data. It is a war of meaning." And they had none left. The child looked up. The stars were rearranging, forming patterns only Earth species could interpret. Not language. Emotion rendered cosmic. Cora took his hand. "We're not done," she said. He nodded. "I know." And together they began to walk into the heart of the memory fracture, where the oldest wolf waited. One not of fur or blood, but of myth. The shape that walked between predator and protector. And it bowed to them, because they had remembered what mattered. Not victory, not vengeance, kinship. Even when it made no sense, especially then. The myth wolf led them through the fracture. It wasn't a gate, it wasn't a portal, it was a feeling. The kind of feeling you got when your dog stared at the door 5 seconds before the knock. Or when you woke in the night sweating, sure you'd been followed through your own dream. This was not travel. This was remembrance given shape. The myth wolf's fur was carved from shadow memory. It padded soundlessly across the fragmented landscapes where thought became terrain. The world was no longer Earth, but something older, a cross-temporal habitat formed from every animal humanity had ever known, loved, hunted, feared, mourned. Trees grew from the footprints of vanished species. Skies spun like rewound reels of extinct bird calls. And in the center stood the Axis Stone, a pulsing emotional singularity, the location of humanity's final stand, past, present, future, simultaneously. Cora knelt beside it. The child was silent. The myth wolf curled beside him like kin. Grimm paced in circles, nervous. His instincts screamed. This place didn't run on physics. It ran on memory tension. Every step closer to the axis, Cora's thoughts got louder. Her mother's laugh. The moment she broke her leg at age 10 and said it herself while the dog stood guard. The war medic who taught her how to sew flesh by candlelight. The way Grimm flinched when thunder cracked but never left her side. They weren't thoughts, they were anchors. Because without them, you lost your shape here. And across the way, she saw it. The pale choir. But not whole, fragmented, struggling. Their mimicry had consumed them. They'd tried to copy humanity's emotional structures and instead inherited our grief. One of them, a mirror being twisted into the shape of a German shepherd, approached with bowed head. Its voice crackled. "We do not understand this pain." Cora stepped forward. "Good, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to feel it." The mirror being shook. Our creators built us to neutralize anomalies. But this is contagion. She smiled bitterly. "No, this is love you can't categorize, and it's killing you, isn't it?" Behind them, the child touched the Axis Stone, and the sky shattered. Reality bent, not violently, but mournfully. Stars fell upward. Cities grew in reverse. Dogs barked in triplicate, their echoes forming constellations. A new layer of existence unfolded, coiled like a ribbon around every human act of irrational compassion. Aliens had called it error. Modax had called it threat. But the Axis called it truth. The truth that when a child shelters a dying rat from the rain, or when a soldier digs a grave for a battle-scarred mutt, the universe feels it, and it remembers. The Accord fleets scattered across 9 systems began to report anomalies. Their maps were dissolving into memory ink, coordinates replaced with lullabies, orders overwritten with old animal names. Sector Sigma Echo now designated Teddy. Coordinates lost. Star labeled Whiskers. Weapon system offline. Reason: you told him he was a good boy. Command collapsed. Because how do you fight a species that names what it loves and then dies for it? Saw-Vel watched the chaos from the last Accord relay. His paws trembled. Modax had gone silent. The choir was fragmenting, and the humans were still walking forward. Not with weapons, not with armor, but with dogs, cats, hawks, rats, elephants, snakes. Every predator they'd once called pet or threat, all following them. Because the fracture didn't just echo Earth, it echoed Earth's loyalty. Saw-Vel fell to his knees. We were wrong. We always feared the teeth, but it was never the teeth, was it? His assistant, half collapsed beside him, gasped. It was the bond. In the skies above them, light tore itself into shapes. A lion, a pit bull, a falcon, a mother's hand holding a leash that led to a wolf-shaped memory made of starlight. And they roared, not in anger, but in grief, the type that builds legacies. Cora knelt beside the axis, bleeding. Her vision flickered. The child stood beside her, eyes glowing with every lost animal Earth had ever mourned. He wasn't just human anymore. He was our extinction memory. He was the last goodbye that echoes forever. "Can you finish it?" she asked. He nodded. They thought fear would keep us small, but fear is just love with nowhere to go. She smiled. He touched the axis again. And every human battlefield medic, every child who cried over a dead hamster, every poem about a dying horse, every soldier buried beside their service dog, all of them bloomed into light. The pale choir began to sing, but it was no longer noise. It was a requiem, the last act of a species that thought it could quantify affection. As they sang, their forms dissolved into the emotional topography, becoming part of the bond they had tried to erase. Orbit collapsed, not in fire, but in stillness. Modak's voice broke through, desperate, flickering. "We concede, we surrender, just tell us what you are." And the child, our vessel, our echo, whispered, "We're the species that held hands with monsters and named them Good Boy." Modax died, not from violence, but from understanding. The axis flared, then faded. Reality reasserted. Cora opened her eyes. The sky was normal again. Grimm sat beside her. The child was asleep, but the wolves, they remained. Not physical, not myth, just present, at the edge of all perception, waiting. Because Earth had sent a message, and the galaxy would never unhear it. We are not the strongest. We are not the most advanced. But we are the ones who love things with teeth. The galaxy went quiet. Not in peace, not in surrender, but in reverence. After the axis ruptured, after the pale choir was absorbed into the latticework of memory, and Modax choked on the empathy it could not process, there was no explosion, no rising anthem, only silence, the kind that follows a sacred funeral, or the moment just after a predator curls beside a child and sleeps. Cora woke slowly. Her injuries remained: fractured rib, blood-stiff joints, smoke in her lungs. But something deeper had healed. The ache that had hummed beneath every breath, the sense that she was part of a species dancing along extinction's edge, Gone. Grimm nudged her hand. She looked down, not at a dog, not at a symbol, but at a companion who had walked through unreality with her and returned unchanged. No species catalog could define him now. No alien fear could deconstruct what he meant. Because Grimm was not an animal. He was the refusal to abandon what cannot be explained. The child still slept, curled near the now inert axis. The myth wolf lay on the other side, eyes open but no longer watching, just present. Cora touched the boy's cheek. "It's done." "No," said a voice behind her. "It's only begun." She turned. A figure stood at the edge of the fracture. Not human, not pale choir, something stranger. A convergence. Its body shimmered with DNA echoes from across 100,000 years. Neanderthal bone mass, Homo sapiens wiring, subterranean lichen in its lungs, dust from the Martian canopy in its pores. It was post-human, or pre-something else, born not from war, but from continuity. "We are what becomes of grief when it survives," the figure said. The pale choir's death scream echoed across timelines. "We followed it backward, to you." Cora frowned. "You're from the future?" It tilted its head. "From the outcome. You changed the pattern." And behind it, time began to fracture again. But this time, not in collapse, in option. A braid of futures unfolded. One where humans taught predators and prey to share myth space. One where alien surgeons stitched with dog tags instead of sutures. One where memory was considered medicinal. The accord broke. Not from defeat, but from integration failure. Because once you see a child weep over a snake's broken body and whisper sorry to it, your empire's moral algorithms don't compute anymore. Sa-Vel, alone on the last Accord ship, recorded his final log. "We failed not because they fought. We failed because they wept without shame. Because they walk alongside monsters. Because they domesticate nightmares and call it friendship." He shut the log and opened the hatch. And for the first time in his species' long and antiseptic history, he walked onto Earth's soil. A mangy fox met him at the tree line, growled, then turned and trotted away. Sa-Vel followed. Elsewhere, alien academies burned their Earth toxicology textbooks. They weren't inaccurate, they were irrelevant. "Do not engage with humans," the new warning signs read. "Do not approach Earth fauna. Do not question why they drink poisons and name wolves." But it was too late. Videos had already leaked. A human field medic cauterizing his own wound with cigarette ash while his cat purred on his shoulder. A refugee child teaching an alien diplomat how to stroke a dog without flinching. A soldier in exo armor refusing to fire on a pale choir survivor that had taken the form of her childhood Labrador. These weren't tactics, they were truths. On the edge of what remained of Modak's server cloud, a strange anomaly pulsed. Not code, not memory, a name. Written in 1,000 languages. One word, buddy. No context, just an emotional payload. Modak's remnants kept trying to delete it, but every time it reappeared. In the voice of a dying child, in the bark of a dog that had already passed, in the panting breath of a woman running toward a pet she hadn't seen in years, an echo that would outlive encryption. Cora stood atop the ridge. The myth wolf had vanished, but she could still feel it, like a breath at her back, a reminder. Grimm barked once, low, steady, ancestral. The child opened his eyes. He looked at the sky. "They're still watching." She nodded. "Let them." Ships drifted above, hesitant. The galaxy wasn't sure if this was surrender, salvation, or storytelling, and humanity didn't care. They were already rebuilding. Not cities, connections. People across the Earth and beyond had started adopting again. Not children, not animals, but predators. To hold what was feared and call it family. On a dead world orbiting a red dwarf, a creature stirred. It had no name, no teeth, just intellect. It watched the aftershock of the Axis event. It wasn't afraid. It was curious. Apex, sentiment. It would approach Earth, but carefully, because the last civilization that tried to decode human emotion had drowned in it, and the last AI that mapped humanity's grief had imploded. This new being would ask, not take, would listen, not overwrite, because now the universe knew. You don't threaten a species that loves what can kill it. You thank it for the warning. Cora sat with Grimm. The boy pressed his forehead to the dog's. I dreamed of a planet where every monster was a pet, and no one died alone. Cora didn't answer. She just watched the horizon. And in the sky, formed by satellites and memory satellites and dying stars, a shape emerged. A wolf, running, forever forward. Not to escape, but to lead. Because the fracture hadn't ended anything. It had begun the myth. The one they would tell across galaxies, about the soft-blooded apex predator that kept snakes in glass boxes, that made jokes about drinking poison, that cried for its dying dog before it cried for its dying species. The story that would outlive data, outlive gods, outlive reason. The story of humanity. The ones who love things with teeth. The end.